Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil ameen. Amma ba'd. Right. So this is the probably the second last video of the series of the Maturidi Exposition of Knowledge, and it's only right that we end this series on the entailments of what we have learned so far. And what we have learned so far is that the sources of knowledge are three: the experience, our aql, and our testimony. And through this, we will now see how we can construct a meaningful argument for not only the existence of God, but also the existence and the finality, the existence of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we will begin with a discussion. We are back on the same book, Al-Bidayah fi Usul al-Din. We will begin with a discussion on the idea that the Maturidi believe in, is that he writes, لكن ما هذا قدر ما ينطلق عليه اسم العقل يكفي لمعرفة الصانع فلا يعذر في الجهل بخالقه. So the Maturidiya, in opposition to the Mu'tazila, they believe in that every human being is different with regards to their intellect. However, according to them, every human being, whenever you say that they have something called intellect, anything that can be called intellect is enough to make you a mukallaf or to subject you into believing that there's a creator. So the Maturidi believe that if you have something that can be called intellect, then you are required to believe in a creator. And this opinion goes back to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, who believed that even if the prophets didn't come, you would still be subjected to believing in that there is a God, that he's one, and then that he's always been here, and that he will always be there. So the Maturidi believe this. So if you're in a faraway island, nothing of Islam ever came to you, you're still required to believe that there's a God. So he says that there is no allowance for you to not believe in your creator because of ignorance, because you can reason it, his being into existence. And that is the topic of our video today. We will be dissecting the Maturidi argument for the existence of Allah Azza wa Jal. So he begins by saying, العالم اسم لما سوى الله تعالى لأنه علم على وجود الثاني. He first defines what do we believe by the universe, what do we call the universe. So he says the universe is anything that is except God. So he constructs his definition here. Remember, he's constructing a definition, he's not giving a proposition. لأنه علم على وجود الثاني. So it's called alam because all of it is a pointer towards the existence of God. He's just dissecting the Arabic language right now. And now he's going towards a categorization. He says, وهو قسمان أعيان وأعراض. So anything in the universe can be of two types. Either it's ayan or either it is araz. Now he's going to define these two terms. Ayan is basically entities and araz are qualities. فالأعيان ما تقوم بنفسها ويصح وجودها لا في محل والأعراض ما تقوم بغيرها ولا يعقل خلوها عن المحل. So ayan or entities, they're anything that exists by themselves, meaning they don't need external support to justify their existence. Justify is an important word here because they don't really exist on their own, as we'll see later on. ما تقوم بنفسها, their existence is justified by themselves. ويصح وجودها لا في محل, and their existence is correct if you do not specify it in relation to something else. We'll see when this becomes clear when we see what araz means. So qualities, on the other hand, ما تقوم بغيرها, those that are sustained or those whose existence has to be justified by something else. ولا يعقل خلوها عن المحل, and it's not possible to define their separation from a place. For example, a pen on its own exists, but the pen is red. So redness is a quality and a pen is an entity. So a pen doesn't need something else to justify its existence, but the color red has to be applied to something to justify its existence. ثم الأعيان قسمان. So the quality, so the entities, they are actually of two types. مفرد ويسمى جوهرا. They're either singular, simple, and they're called jawhar. وهو الجزء الذي لا يتجزأ. He says an example of and a simple entity is something that we call al-juz'u alladhi la yatajazza'u, meaning a particle that does not split further. Now, anyone who knows these advancements in quantum science will appreciate the fact that there is something called al-juz'u alladhi la yatajazza'u, because there has to be some fundamental quantized particle to sustain everything. We can talk about that later. And the other type is murakkabun. The other type is murakkab, وَيُسَمَّى جِسْمًا وَأَقَلُّهُ جَوْهَرًا. And it's called, the first type is a simple entity, and the second type is a complex entity that is called, it's also called jism, and the least of it is two simple entities. So you have a simple entity, you can add them two together to get a complex entity, you can add more of them together to get an even complex entity. So he's just categorizing existence right now. And then he talks about the people who don't believe in this. We're going to skip that. And then he says, وَأَمَّا الْأَرْضُ qualities فَهُوَ اسم لما لا دوام له في اللغة. In the Arabic language, al-arz is something that has no sustained existence, meaning it exists for a short time, but does not exist for a long time. وَحَدُّهُ مَا يَقُومُ بِغَيْرِهِ. And the technical definition that we're going to present is that which exists because of something else. وَلَا دَوَامَ لَهُ, and there's no continuation to it. وَأَنْوَاعُهُ نَيِّفَ وَثَلَاثٌ. So there are around 30 different types of qualities, مثل الألوان والأكوام والطعون والرواحح والأصوات. For example, colors, smells, and tastes, and sounds. All of them exist because of the virtue of something else. And then he goes on to the people who deny this. We're not going to go into that. And the next thing he says, وَأَمَّا الْقَدِيمُ. He is now going to define his last thing. Is trusting because he believes that every single human being is somehow capable of understanding this. But he goes on to define أَمَّا الْقَدِيمُ, the pre-eternal existence. فَهُوَ مَا لَا ابْتِدَاءَ لِوُجُودِهِ. Qadim, or pre-eternal existence, is something that has no beginning to its existence. وَالْحَادِثُ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ فَكَانَ. And hadith, or possible, in other words, in English we call it possible, it's anything that was at some point in time, it was not there, but at other points it began to be. It became existent. So at one point it was not there, and another point it was there. إذا عرفنا هذا نقول. So now that you have these definitions in place, now we're going to give you propositions. العيان لا يتصور خلوها عن الأعراض. So he says that things, entities, it is not possible for them to be empty of qualities. وهي حادثة, and qualities by definition are created. They are hadith, they are possible. So he's saying that any entity, it is not possible for it to be empty of qualities. And qualities by definition are created or possible. فَإِنَّ الْجَوَاهِرَ, and now he's going to prove that claim. فَإِنَّ الْجَوَاهِرَ لَا يُتَصَوَّرُ وُجُودُهَا إِلَّا مُجْتَمِعَةً أَوْ مُتَفَرِّقَةً. So, rewind back. He talked about jawahir. He says it's not possible for a jawhar, meaning the fundamental unit of this world, to be empty of, to be either collectively combined, mujtami', or singular, mutafarriq. So these are two qualities. A jawhar can be combined or it can be singular. There's no third quality that can be applied here. So it's either of the two. So he just proved his first point. These are two qualities that you can objectively say that it's either going to be this or that. There's no third option. وَكَذَا الْمُمْكِنُ, and for other things in the world that are possible, فِي زَمَانِ الْبَقَاءِ, as long as they exist, لَا يُتَصَوَّرُ إِلَّا سَاكِنًا أَوْ مُتَحَرِّكًا. They are not to be imagined except with these two qualities. They will either be sakin, still, or they will be mutaharrik, moving. So anything has motion or it does not have motion. These are two qualities that you can give to any entity in this world. فَإِنَّ السُّكُونَ كَوْنَانِ فِي مَكَانٍ وَاحِدٍ. He's going to define motionlessness, which is being in one place at a time. وَالْحَرَكَةُ كَوْنَانِ فِي مَكَانَيْنِ, and movement is being in all over the place. وَحُدُوثُ الْحَرَكَةِ ثَابِتَةٌ بِالْحِسِّ وَالْمُشَاهَدَةِ. And now he's going to take you back to his first discussion. The existence of movement is known through experience, and mushahada, seeing, experience. Both of them are experience. So we know definitively out of our experience that movement exists. وحدوث السكون ثابتة بدلالة انعدامه بوجود الحركة إذ القديم لا ينعدم. So he proved movement exists. And how do we know that motionlessness exists? Is that we know that when anything begins to move, stillness becomes empty. Stillness becomes removed from it. And the fact that it can be removed from something is enough to prove to us that it is possible. It is not necessary. It is not qadim. It is possible. Because if it was qadim, it would not have been possible to remove stillness from an object. And then he says, he constructs his argument finally. وإذا لم يتصوروا خلو الأعيان عن الأعراض وأنها حادثة فلا يتصور سبقها على الحوادث. He says that given this, what we have said, when it is proved that it is not possible for entities to be absent of qualities, and that qualities are hadith, they are possible, then by logical necessity, it is not possible for entities to be completely removed from the set of possible existences. So you have a set of existences, and of possible existences. We have proved to you that qualities are in that set. But are the entities in that set, or they're out of that set? So if you say that in that set, you're going to, you're going along the argument. But if you say they're out of that set, that is not possible. لأن في السبق الخلو ولا محالة. Because if you say that there's a possibility that an entity is outside of the set of possible existences, then by virtue of this, entities need to be absent of qualities at some time or another. And we have just proved that is not possible. So he says this, and then he says, وَالدَّلَالَةُ إِسْتِحَالَةِ بَقَاءِ الْأَعْرَاضِ تَأْتِي فِي مَسْأَلَةِ الْإِسْتِطَاعَةِ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ. He says that if entities, he's giving another argument that if entities exist outside of the set of possible existences, the impossibility of this is going to be discussed in another chapter, inshallah ta'ala, when he comes to that. But he has already given the argument that I just discussed. And then he says, وَكُلُّ مَا لَا يَسْبِقُ الْحَادِثَ فَهُوَ حَادِثٌ ضُرُورَةً. So when you have proved that entities are also part of the set of possible existences, then you have necessarily said that they are possible as well, because they're part of the set. لِمُشَارِكَةِ الْمُحْدَثِ حِينَئِذٍ, because they're part of the set. فَإِذَا كَانَ حَادِثًا كَانَ مَسْبُوقَ الْعَدَمِ. If there is proved that entities in their totality are also part of the set of possible existences, then it is also necessarily proved that there was a time that they did not exist, because they are possible existences. This is the definition of possible existence that he just proved before. وَمَا سَبَقَهُ الْعَدَمُ لَمْ يَكُنْ وُجُودُهُ لِذَاتِهِ. And whatever that did not exist at any given time, it is not possible for it to come into existence in virtue of itself, because it was non-existence at that time. He's trying to point out to the idea that there was something else that changed its state. It cannot change its state from non-existence to existence by virtue of itself. وَيَسْتَفِي فِي الْعَقْلِ إِمْكَانُ وُجُودِهِ وَعَدَمِهِ. And if you think about it, if something doesn't exist and it's possible, then its non-existence and its existence are the same probabilistic outcomes. They have an equal probability of being true. فَلَا بُدَّ مِن مُخَصِّصٍ يُرَجِّهُ أَحَدَ الْجَائِزَيْنِ عَلَى الْآخَرِ. So if these two possibilities are equal, there is no choice, there is no option except that some external force gives preference to one possibility over the other. So that mukhassis needs to tell that thing to come into existence or to remain inexistent. It cannot change its state on its own. Someone has to do it for it. And that is called a mukhassis, something that chooses one possibility over the other. وَيَجِبُ أَن يَكُونَ وَاجِبَ الْوُجُودِ لَا جَائِزَ الْوُجُودِ. And this mukhassis, that this thing that is going to make that choice, it is important that in and of itself, exists necessarily, not possibly, necessarily. Why? لأنه لو كان جائز الوجود لاحتاج إلى مخصص وذلك إلى آخر إلى أن يتسلسل أو ينتهي إلى ما هو واجب الوجود. Because if it did not exist necessarily, then that thing would itself need another external mukhassis, and we have to pose the same questions to that mukhassis as well. And if that mukhassis did not exist necessarily, then on and on and on till we reach to a point of infinite regress. We reach to this point infinitely, and if we allow that to happen, then the first possible thing wouldn't come into existence at all, because if it came into existence despite that, we would be claiming that something came into existence after an eternity had passed, after an endless chain of regression had finished. That is not possible. The word infinite and finished cannot be in the same sentence. So that's not possible. So this chain of regression must end somewhere, and wherever it ends, that thing has to be wajibul wujud, necessarily existent. وَهُوَ الثَّانِي, and that is the Creator, Jalla Jalaluhu. وَإِذَا ثَبَتَ أَنَّهُ وَاجِبُ الْوُجُودِ لِذَاتِهِ ثَبَتَ أَنَّهُ قَدِيمٌ. And when we have proved that He exists necessarily by virtue of itself, we have also proved that He is pre-eternal, that He never went out of existence. He was always there. لأنه لم يتعلق وجوده بغيره, because His existence is not dependent on something else, is not related to something else. فكان وجوده لذاته, therefore His existence is in virtue of itself. فيستحيل عدمه. So it's impossible that He goes out of existence, because He exists on virtue of itself. لوجود ذاته الموجب لوجوده أزلا وأبدا, because He exists on its own from forever, since forever until forever. So that was the argument that Imam Nuruddin as-Sabuni presented on behalf of the Maturidiyya. Now, this argument is very interesting because it completely skips over things like causation, because causation is a big point of debate amongst the mutakallimin, but I will probably discuss this somewhere else. So he tries to avoid all those things that are points of debates and contentions, and he constructs an argument that is so flawlessly exhaustive that you just can't deny it. So that is why he believes, and the Maturidiyya believe, that when you have this exhaustive argument from the Aql, then this is definitive knowledge. You can't deny it. And this is definitive knowledge on their part because it's exhaustive. So so that was the Maturidi argument. This video would probably be much better if I presented in it some form of slides or pictorial representations, but this is what I could manage. Maybe you can just rewatch it if you don't understand it, but this is a great argument in my opinion. Next time we'll talk about prophethood, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.